Hi. So, as I'm waiting for new power tubes to come in for my amp, I thought I would make a little video talking about treble peakers and specifically the ones that pertain to the Marshall style circuits that I prefer and like to design, and a lot of videos that people on the channel watch. So, I kind of want to unveil this. I guess it's not necessarily a secret weapon, but again, we'll forget about these two guys over here for a sec. Focus on these ones. I haven't seen many people talk about it, and if you look at different schematics, you can see a couple different values. And if you go and read books about the subject, I pretty much just see a range of anywhere from 100 to 500, and Marshall typically being a 470 picofarad, and I've seen a lot of people substitute, myself included, substitute the 470 picofarad ceramic with a 500 picofarad silver mica. And so anyway, I digress. So some of the cool sounds that I find are when I, either parallel a capacitor or just altogether take, say, a stock 500 out and swap it out with something else. For instance, you could look at a 3 gain stage Jose Arredondo style amp, and the second gain stage being that typical super lead where it has the 470, then it has a 4700 nanofarad bright cap on the gain pot as well. So super aggressive, super bright. But again, it lends itself to that sound, and combined with the type of power supply and everything, yada yada yada. But again, I think the treble peaker value, especially in conjunction with a bright cap and a gain pot, can do so much to affect the tone, and it's one of the reasons that people love certain sounds and certain circuits. So, for instance, there's a lot of amp techs who take out the I don't have one here right now, but actually I do. So the 1000 picofarad bright cap on, like, let's say a JCM 800, because especially at low volumes can be kind of brittle and thin sounding. But I also think the fact that it's ceramic plays a role into that. So some of the videos you hear on this channel, I've been experimenting again with different material types, and quite frankly, because of their ubiquitousness and kind of pleasant, a little bit darker, smoother sound, I do like the Mallory 150s. Again, saves a little bit of money, but really, really cool sound tonally. I've also experimented with the handmade Jupiter capacitors, and I really want to try some of the red Astron Jupiter capacitors, but again, very expensive. Maybe it'll be like a Christmas present to myself or something. But I digress. Something I like to do is, and what I've seen other people do, is make that switchable. So, for instance, I actually have 2 bright cap values on a push-pull pot, and I can take them in or out of the circuit, and then shave off a little bit if I want to, but still want to have that high-end frequency in there. So it adds a lot of modularity to the sound, but again, adds more gain, and you will hear a little bit more hiss come through, especially if your amp is vintage and has carbon composite resistors on the cathodes, and eventually I'll get there as well. But really quickly, I love the sound of these silver micas, and part of some of my mods are taking out the ceramic cap that I find, and I replace it with some of these higher quality, sorry, I just hit the camera there, higher quality silver mica capacitors that I got off Mouser. And they, in conjunction with, and I'll bring it in here, these Jupiter bypass caps sound so, so cool. And these are polyester with, I believe, some silver foil. And I don't have one with me of the same value, but it's a 0.68. And I also have the electrolytics from Nishikon, which also sound really, really, really cool. This is a typically used in a power supply, but I've also put it on the 820 ohm resistor for that quote unquote fat cap mod. And I believe when Eddie Van Halen had that put on his number one amp, it was a 330 microfarad. It was really, really big cap. And it definitely beefens up the sound quite a bit. But if you look at a much smaller value, stock Marshall being the 0.68, I've actually tried on earlier gain stages, 0.22, and if you see, I think it's on the Mesa Boogie Coliseum, Mark II, I think it actually has a 470 nanofarad. So, 0.47. And again, upper mid-range, really, really cool sound. And if you take a stock, let's say JCM 800 style circuit, like the idealized one I had the other day, where you have a 0.02 on the first gain stage and a 500 picofarad bright cap, standard, over a 470k resistor, standard. And then the second coupling cap is a 0022 with a 500 picofarad silver mica. Has that really cool sound, but again, much more pleasant to the ear. And I've actually tried polyester as well for the bright caps. And if you're using Mallory's, you're able to roll off a little bit of that high end. And what you might lose in some clarity that I think the ceramic would have, it's the kind of clarity that would provide a little too much of that kind of string, twangy sort of sound. And I don't know if you ever heard a humbucker that suddenly sounds like a single coil pickup, but I don't find it very pleasant to the ear. And what's cool is I think the Mallory's do a really good job of, again, smoothing out that sound. All right, so I just want to talk about some other, kind of more famous circuits. Like, for instance, I will change a treble peaker and I will actually put a 0022, and that has a lot more high end coming through. And if it's too much, I would say if you're looking at using a bright cap mod on your gain pot, just be wary of that. But yeah, if you look at a Soldano, an SLO 100 or a Hot Rod 50, there's a 0022 bright cap on that first gain stage and a 1000 picofarad bright cap on the gain pot. But in the Hot Rod 50, much similar to the Marshall circuit, it has a 500 picofarad, at least on the schematic that I saw, on the second gain stage. So lots of high-end emphasis, and what people talk about is that upper mid-range emphasis. Super cool sound, especially when you think about how your amp is interacting with the negative feedback frequencies of especially, how the cathode bypass caps affect it. And once I started to experiment with that a little bit more and find where that touch sensitivity and that really cool Randy Rhoads cranked presence sort of sound, crunchy, awesome distortion comes from, I was like, wow, now I'm getting somewhere. So, I've talked about Soldanos, and Wizards too. If you look at the first gain stage, which is fixed on there, it's a 0022 bright cap and a 0022 input. So cool, very cool sound. And on top of that, I also really love playing with the coupling cap values. So for instance, I mentioned in that idealized 800 circuit, that second 0022 cap, changing that value from the standard 0.02, you can hear a little bit more of this subtle pulsing effect in the overdrive distortion, especially if you're hitting the front end with extra gain stage circuit or an overdrive pedal or a boost pedal. It comes through even more. And I really wanted to make this video and just kind of talk about what are some of my ideas around treble frequencies and how you can really get some pleasant overdrive characteristics by changing those coupling cap values. And quite frankly, if you change that 0.02 down to a lower value as well, the effect is even more so, whether you want that or not. I, again, quite frankly, love that sound. And it's something that you hear a lot in the videos that I make and a lot of the circuits that I design. And I just wanted to sort of pull back the curtain again and just talk about why it is we love certain circuits and certain treble frequency responses. And quite frankly, you know, if you can tame that aggressive high end, you know, be it with a plate load bypass capacitor bleeding off some of that treble frequency, or, you know, that Friedman dark mod, it's all possible. And in conjunction with a negative feedback modification as well, you get some really amazing sounds, and not necessarily being the exact same Marshall circuit that we know and love, but changing it to fit closer to the sound that we hear in our heads. All right, I appreciate you so much for watching. I, again, just want to say thank you to everyone who's subscribing to the channel. It's a huge help. It's important to my wife and I that we have music in our lives, and working on amplifiers and talking about music. We would love for you to stick with us. We have some other stuff coming up. We want to do album reviews, ones that we love and ones that we've discovered together, and where I find some of my guitar tones. And please let me know if there are any tone chases you guys are curious about, or a particular circuit you want me to try, or we want to make a video on. I'm going to try and expand my video setup here very soon as well. We're going to be moving later this year, so we might have some flux in the channel. But again, thank you for following us, and hope you guys have a great day. Long live rock and roll.